Bizarre Reality Media. The reality we live in can be a very strange place. Most of the time, fact being stranger than fiction. How will we ever start to understand this reality we live in unless we question everything? Join me and a guest as we unravel the mysteries of this reality, one topic at a time. This is Inquiries of Our Reality with Shayn Jones. What is up, Inquirers, and welcome to the expanse of conversational exploration into the fringes of social norms. I'm the one they call Shane, and today for you guys, we'll be delving into the world beyond our own with author, investigator, and paranormal researcher Cyn Shrader Hill, a woman who has dedicated her life to documenting the unseen. From EVPs to ghostly experiences, she's here to share it all. But before we get into this fascinating episode today, just a couple of quick news and updates. First and foremost, I am trying to put together a Halloween special for you guys. So if 10 of you guys don't mind calling in to the Bizarre Reality Hotline and leaving your guys' paranormal and or bizarre experiences, then I'll be able to put that episode together. I'll be contacting you just to make sure and verify that it's cool that we use it for the episode. But if I can, again, at least get 10 of you guys to call in, that'd be absolutely awesome because I want to be able to include you guys in the Halloween special. So I'm just letting you guys know now. And if you guys are interested in doing that, that number is 313-364-1551. And I know you guys are tired of hearing this, so this will be the last episode that I mention it on. As far as the old episodes go, everybody complaining about having a lot of ads on them. It's an issue with when I uploaded from my last RSS host to my current RSS host. So unfortunately, there are ads that are embedded into the episodes on top of the ads that Spreaker has on the episodes. So what I'm slowly starting to do is go back and replace the audio for those episodes. So hopefully you guys can bear with me for a little bit until I can get those all updated, because it is over 300 episodes that I'm going to have to update. So it's going to take a little while, but I'll try to hit the key episodes first. But if there's one that you guys really want to listen to, ad-free, you guys can always go and check it out on the Bizarre Reality Patreon. And also, if anybody might be interested in catching the next live episode of Bizarre Inquiries, you guys will be able to catch that on October 2nd at 7:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time over there on the Bizarre Reality Media YouTube and Twitch channel. And if anybody has any questions, clips, articles, or anything they'd like to submit for that, make sure you guys get it to us before then. And of course, that will be more of our Halloween special. So if anybody has anything cool for Halloween they would like us to talk about in the show, again, make sure you guys get it to us before then. And also a bit of an update, the t-shirt giveaway is still going on. I don't know why I'm having so much difficulty with trying to reach 50, but that's the goal number, so we're going to keep at it until we hit that point. If anybody might be interested in winning a free t-shirt of their choice off of the Bizarre Reality merch store, then all you guys have to do is go and fill out a quick 8-question survey. That's all your guys' thoughts and opinions on the show. It should only take about 3 to 5 minutes. It should be a pretty quick one. And it all goes back for your guys' opinions on the show, so I can hopefully grow and improve as this year goes on, especially coming into the spooky season. I would definitely appreciate getting some of your guys' opinions. And all else fails, you might end up winning a free t-shirt out of it. So definitely worth going and checking out. And if anyone is interested in being a guest on the show, sharing their experiences or encounters on the show, or contacting me for any reason whatsoever, you guys can get a hold of me through email, which is inquiriesofourrealitypodcast@outlook.com, or you guys can always call or text the Bizarre Reality hotline number, and that number again is 313-364-1551. And if you guys happen to miss that, it is available down in the show description. And if you guys might be interested in supporting the show, there are a couple of different ways that you guys can do so. So first and foremost, you guys can go and check out the Patreon with 2 tiers available, ad-free/early access and full access. And with full access, we are starting to build up a bit of a back pile of bonus episodes, the 0.5 full episodes. So if you guys might be interested in going and checking that out, we're slowly building it up over there. So you guys will have stuff that's exclusively behind the paywall, and you guys will have the mainstream stuff. And also, you guys could go and check out the Bizarre Reality merch store. T-shirts over there are just $15.68 plus shipping, so not too bad. About evens out to about what a normal T-shirt is, about $20. So if you guys don't mind going and supporting hopefully one of your favorite podcasts, I would definitely appreciate it. And you guys could always donate to the show directly if you guys might be interested in getting me an energy drink or something to be able to stay up at night to edit these episodes for you guys. I would definitely appreciate it. And the last thing you guys can do is go and check out the affiliate links with some additional discounts and credits available for you guys down there in the show description. And I know that times can be tough, so if anybody is still interested in supporting the show in some other ways, you guys could always go and leave an awesome review for the show on any podcatcher you happen to use. And of course, I will read it on the show and give you guys a big shout out. You guys can also go and follow the show on Instagram and Facebook. Make sure that you guys get updates for anything new and interesting going on with the show. And you guys could always share the show with a friend through word of mouth if you think anybody might enjoy the show as a whole or possibly a specific episode. You guys can also go and catch live shows on the Bizarre Reality Media, YouTube, and Twitch channels. And the last thing you guys can do is also go and check out my other show, Bizarre Encounters with Shayn Orin. Kind of diving into a lot of the same stuff over there, but in a different format. Over here, we got the conversation style, and over there, we do our own deep dives, and we, of course, make some jokes and stuff along the way. And every single thing that I mentioned is all available off of the link tree, which is available down in the show description. And with that, let's get into the show. Please welcome to the show, paranormal investigator, researcher, and also author, Cyn Shrader Hill. How's it going today?
Hey, thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
Absolute pleasure to finally get you on the show. As we were talking about before we recorded, with a lot of these shows, there's always stuff that happens that makes it so the date gets pushed out a little bit. But like I was kind of mentioning, I think that everything happens for a reason. So stuff sometimes gets pushed back, but it ends up falling in line with a lot of other stuff I'm talking about at the show at the time. So I'm really hoping today, it's one of those days where you end up getting into something we don't expect. So
right? There's no telling what we'll get into.
And I hear that you have a lot of fascinating stories that we could definitely dive into. But before we get into all of that, of course, for anybody that may not be familiar with who you are, what you do exactly, why don't you kind of give them a little bit of your background and let them know exactly what you do?
Sure. Cyn Shrader Hill. I am in Flintville, Tennessee, home of the Flintville Monster, if you're a cryptid person. And 5 miles from here, I started Investigated in 2013, so late to the game. Started writing books 2018 because I was editing for someone else, and started writing about my experiences and my friends' experiences. I had founded Elk Valley Paranormal in 2014 after I got trained in knowing what to do with and on a team and with and on an investigation and all of the equipment and all of that stuff. So it's just been ongoing learning experience, and I still am learning.
Hey, that's one of the hard things when it comes to this research is that anybody that has definite answers usually want to run the other direction. If you're not learning every day doing any type of research, then, you're not really doing the true research of it. So that's honestly the best mentality to have going into this type of stuff. But also considering that, you got into the paranormal and everything, a lot of people have background experiences and why exactly they got into it, from, just being interested in the books to having their own personal experiences. So what exactly got you into the paranormal and started your fascination with it?
I've always been interested in it, just didn't know how to go about starting my own team because I wanted my own team. You saw all of the shows on TV and, just bombarded with all these different television shows, and still are. And I was looking at all of them, good ones, bad ones, in-between ones, and all that, trying to learn. And of course, you don't learn from TV, really. You learn once you get in the field what TV doesn't show you, that usually we're just sitting in the dark trying to get some kind of answer, some kind of response of something beyond that we can't see. I was a weird kid growing up.
I think a lot of us were.
I think most of us were. Yeah, I think you're right. Goodness, my dad died in '01, and my cousin had her art studio investigated. So in 2013, this is when she had her art studio investigated. I asked my mother if it was okay for them to come down and investigate the old store to see if my dad was still there. And she said, that's fine as long as you don't bring them to the house. They're not investigating the house. That's fine with me. And so they showed up. I was the triggerology, stood in the dark, asked my dad questions, hoping to get some kind of answer. The only place their instruments went crazy was exactly where my dad's chair sat for 30 years. And everything had been turned off in the building for a few years prior to this. It was an auto parts business. So when Dad died, it was just Mom and my sister running it. So here in the Bible Belt, 2 women running an auto parts store when there's Walmart selling auto parts right down the street, and all the box stores. You got O'Reilly's, Advanced, and the others. And so they just couldn't compete and had to close. I don't know for certain that I got anything specifically from my dad that night, but a rock was thrown, and it was when they took a break. So it was almost like, hey, I was ready to start talking to you guys. Get back to work, which is exactly like my dad would have been. And so, could that have been him? Maybe. Who knows, right? So once they did their investigation, they got 2 EVPs. And the first one was holy mackerel, which nobody in my family said, but the building had been an ice cream factory. It had been a Red Cross building. It had been a turkey slaughterhouse in the late 1800s. There were still vats in the basement. And in the basement, they got turkeys gobbling as an EVP. So I was hooked that night. And they asked me to join. And I soon became case manager and found places for us to investigate. They trained me, excuse me, and it was the co-founder that actually told me that I was sensitive. That's why things were happening around me. I didn't know that. I didn't know what that meant. So fast forward a little bit, I find out that's why I started having panic attacks when I was 10 years old. So I was taking on everybody's information, everybody's energy, whether it was good or bad. And I couldn't stand crowds, couldn't stand going to a auditorium with a lot of people in it. It was just too much, too loud, too bright. Everything was just too much. But it was because I was taking on everybody's energy. And so I know how to make myself safe and block myself from all of that energy so that I can go to places and I don't freak out and have those panic attacks, because they can be pretty bad. And there's probably some of your listeners that have panic attacks and don't know why they're having them. It could be because they are sensitive as well.
Sometimes I wonder if stuff like that also kind of plays in a little bit to like the observer effect, as in, if you're conscious of it, you're going to have more of an interaction with it. It's kind of the same thing with like a lot of people that don't believe in the paranormal, and then they're like, why am I not experiencing things that, people that believe in the paranormal experience? And I think it's a matter of, again, it's like things interact differently when you're actually conscious of them. So if you go your entire life never believing in the paranormal, then you're never going to experience these types of things. And that being said, for even being somewhat of an empath or being sensitive to these things, if you block that off in your own mind, then of course you never become sensitive. But if you become attuned to the people around you, then I think that you become more attuned to it. And that's why people such as yourself are able to kind of turn it off at certain times once they're aware of it. Again, it's like, I kind of wonder if it works the same, like I was kind of mentioning, as like the observer effect with this.
Could very well be. I just wish I knew back when I was 10 years old how to turn it down, turn it out or turn it off completely so that I wasn't experiencing those, because some were emergency room visits. If you're having a severe anxiety attack, it can feel like a heart attack. And I've ended up in the ER twice over it. And it was nothing. It was just anxiety. So
especially in the Bible Belt, it's kind of hard to like find help with a lot of that stuff, because there's two backgrounds when it comes to a lot of the churches. There's people that kind of acknowledge that some people have gifts and they see it as like a gift from God, for example. And then the other half see it as like a demonic gift. So it's not something that you can necessarily bring up, because, I mean, even if you talk with one person about it, it doesn't mean the rest of the people, might not feel completely differently about it. So I've talked to a good handful of people that grew up kind of in that situation where they kind of knew something was up, but they didn't necessarily get the like spiritual help that they needed with it, because I'm glad that like the movement's starting to shift a little bit, where people are starting to acknowledge that these things happen. But, for a long time, it was just one of those things where it's almost like you kind of suffer in silence for a while. And until the internet, a blessing and a curse at the same time, people weren't able to really connect and really start to understand these things about themselves and really be able to work at them and not feel like they were alone in the universe and just experiencing anxiety for no reason. Because this is, again, like you've kind of mentioned, a pretty common thing with a lot of sensitive people or a lot of people that have like empath abilities is, they go their whole life wondering why they're always so anxious and they can't be around crowds and stuff. And then once somebody, says I've had the same experiences and kind of lays it down a little bit with them, then they can kind of start working with it. But it's unfortunate that, a lot of people have gone so long without having anybody to really talk to this type of stuff about.
Exactly. And, growing up in the Bible Belt, we didn't talk about ghosts. It just didn't happen unless it was Halloween. Then you did. I know some people had Christmas ghost stories that they would tell. We didn't. I wish we had, because I've always loved ghost stories. My bedtime story was actually a ghost story. So I would beg my grandmother every night to tell it to me. And she would say, I just told it to you. I just told it to you last night. Please tell me again. And I wouldn't go to sleep until she would tell me. And it would end with, boo, now go to sleep. So,
already setting a pace for, at least getting used to this type of stuff,
I was ready for it then.
Hold on tight, guys. We'll be right back after this brief commercial break. And now back to the show.
That is actually the first story in my first book, my bedtime story.
Is it, just out of curiosity, is it based on like local folklore or anything, or is it just something that your grandma came up with just for the sake of coming up with an interesting story?
It is an actual story. My great uncle was a scaredy cat, and it's about him. And it was not a real ghost. He was terrified of anything and everything. And a woman from the poor farm had gotten out. And it was a stormy night. He was by himself. She snuck up on him and hugged him around the neck, scared the bejeebies out of him. So that was the story. It was about my great uncle. And I've always heard that story and just, I can't get enough of it. It's just the best. He also, there's another story, and I don't have it in a book yet, but I am going to write a book about funny ghost stories. And this one is going to go in it. He was also riding home one night on his horse, and he heard something behind him. And he looked back, and he saw this ghost chasing him. And so he egged his horse on faster and faster. And whenever he would go faster, the thing behind him would go faster. And he was terrified. By the time he got to his house, he was sweating bullets. He knew he was dead. He turned around. It was just a gray horse that was following him.
It just wanted somewhere to go. It was following the other horse. You can't get mad at him.
Wait, don't go so fast. I wish I had known him. I never got to, I think I was very, very young when he died, like maybe 2. So I don't remember him. I would love to have known him as a person, because I just think he would be hysterical to talk to.
Especially with he probably has a lot more ghost stories that he may not have even told anybody either. That's the other interesting part, is that with a lot of these people, you know, you have their stories that get passed down, but it makes you wonder how many more stories there may have been that they never passed down. And sometimes those end up being the best ones, because people don't want to sound like they're crazy, you know, if they tell this story. So, you know, they leave the more mild ones, and they leave the ones that are a little bit out there for themselves. And unfortunately, a lot of the time they just, you know, end up disappearing with the family member, unfortunately.
And those can be real ghost stories too. He might have seen something real and just never told anybody about it.
Yeah, because I mean, if he was the guy that's talking about the horse chasing him home, after you told a couple of those stories, you might be like, wow, you know, maybe I can't tell this story because they're going to say, well, is he another horse?
Nobody's going to believe me. Nobody will believe me.
So kind of diving someone into your books a little bit, since you're starting to bring them up a bit, you'd mentioned that your investigating eventually kind of led into you researching and getting into your books. So as far as like your books go, you mentioned that you had that your first story as your first story in your book. Did you start kind of sharing your paranormal experience books or your paranormal experiences while investigating? Or did you really start diving into like local ghost stories and local history and all that type of stuff and start writing books about that?
So I was editing the guy's books that does my covers and illustrations. And he asked me when I was going to write my own. And he kind of talked me into it. So I started writing a book on EVPs. I became the EVP person in the group, and it was just my thing. The first piece of equipment I got after my recorder was a SB7, and it's for some reason I could hear the voices a little bit easier than the rest of my team could on that spirit box. So I wanted to write about the investigations and the EVPs I had found, and I wanted people to be able to actually hear them. Well, I couldn't figure out how to do that. And so I put that book to the side. It became my third book. I'll tell you about it in a minute. So I went ahead and just put some short stories together, mostly about Lincoln County, where I live. And there's only 5 in the whole book that are outside of the county. 2 of them are, or a 1-2-part story is in Lynchburg, Tennessee, just right up the road where Jack Daniels is made. And it was at the Lynchburg Haunted Home. A couple of things happened. But for the most part, it's things that had happened to me around here, and when I lived in Arizona, when I went on vacation, and a couple of my team members. So that's the first book. It's all, and I just write short stories. I don't have the attention span to sit down and write and write and write and write. Short stories I can conjure up, but if I'm going to write a book on just one subject, I hadn't been able to figure out, other than the EVP book, how to do that. So, but the EVP book, I got to break up into chapters, and I found what I wanted to do was these were investigations of Elk Valley Paranormal, and I had my website, elkvalleyparanormal.com. So you can go to the evidence section, to the drop-down menu, to the They're Speaking tab. Click on that, and there's over 100 EVPs that you can go through the book, reading the stories, and then hear the EVPs that are in the book.
So just out of curiosity, what are some of your, I guess, personal favorite ones that you've written about in your books? Because you mentioned that you kind of have a range of, you know, some little bit more mild ones to some a bit more horrifying ones. So I'd love to hear some of the experiences that you've gone through and some of the experiences that your team has gone through. And if you'd like to, I'd also like to dive into maybe some of your personal favorite EVPs that you've uncovered too.
Sure. So do you want personal things that have happened first, or the EVPs, or both?
Oh, wherever you'd like to start, it's fine with me.
I think the very first EVP I got was at the old hospital, and it was a Class A get out. And it was just, I was so excited to hear that voice come across my recorder. that I finally had something that I could say, I actually investigated and got this. So that was my very first. And then after that, I started being able to hear voices a little bit more and looking at the audio clips and being able to tell where there was something extra. And I could go in and clean up the audio and pull out more EVPs, not class A, but others that you could slow down or take the noise out and hear better.
Have you gotten any of the layered ones out of curiosity? I've been hearing a few people talk lately about they'll break up an EVP and they'll have like multiple layers of voices, and I always find those ones fascinating.
I've got one from the old gin here in Old Cotton Mill, and I asked, they for some reason, we had a couple on the team at the time, Chip and Pam. Chip has passed on, but they loved Chip, and for whatever reason, they liked talking to Chip. They didn't like to talk to me and Pam, and so Chip goes out on a smoking break, and everything got really quiet. And I said, "Are you guys not going to talk to us?" And they said, "Talking to Chip." And I said, "You're not going to talk to us?" And then they started talking back and forth to each other. And there were several different voices. One said, "Oh, lost Chip. Chip's not there. Oh, find Chip. Find Chip." And someone said, "Get Lisa." And she said something else. Who wants me? So it was just back and forth. They were conversing. And it was all over Chip taking a smoke break.
Those ones are always fascinating because that's where you really start to get into like the aspects of residual versus like an intelligent haunting. Because, I think with a lot of the stuff that people experience, it's definitely residual. But every once in a while, you come across these very clear like intelligent hauntings. And I almost kind of wonder if they might be something else. And it kind of goes into, I guess, a little bit of your belief system on whether or not you think that like souls stay or consciousness like stays or exists here. But I mean, regardless of that, it seems like there tends to be a rut of things. Like if something is always constantly experienced in the same spot, you'll start experiencing these things that'll just stick. Like you mentioned a little bit earlier with the turkeys, like that's like a prime example of that, yes. Turkeys, they aren't on the same level of consciousness as humans as far as we know. So when it comes to stuff like, paranormal turkeys, that's just something you don't typically come across. But the sounds, of course, that's one of those things that it seems like it's something that's stuck. And that's one of the things that I've been talking about on the show forever is I don't even think it necessarily has to do with like negative emotions. Definitely with the turkeys because assumably they're being slaughtered. But when you get into situations where it's like, a bar, for example, where a lot of people are having a good time and you hear the piano music playing, you hear glasses clinking, I think this residual just happens with a lot of energy in one area that whether it's negative, positive, it doesn't matter. It's just when there's a lot of something that repeatedly happens in the same area, then you start having these same experiences. And even possibly with your dad, you said you weren't necessarily sure if it was him necessarily, but, if it's the same spot, same things, it may have just well been like a residual of him. Even the get back to work idea, that could have also been something residual. But, I think that there's a lot to look into with that because that goes into a whole other like layer of science. But the intelligence stuff, like I said, depending on your belief system, is it actually your family members that are sticking around, or could it be something else that's kind of slipping into the facade and just saying that they are just because they want to be able to interact with you?
Yeah, and that's a great point because we'll never truly know until we're on that side.
Mm-hmm.
If then, we don't know who we're talking to. We know it might sound like this person or that person. The best one I have is of my nephew. Best EVP I've ever gotten. And it was while his mother was talking to me, telling a story that had to have divine intervention to have happened and Wyatt was involved. So during that story, he actually speaks, and it was the first sign, the first legitimate sign I had gotten from him since 2022. And happened several months after his death. So to me, yes, it was him, because I could hear the smile in his voice, because he was always a little jokester. He was my mini me, and it was him. And then I was telling a story on another podcast about Wyatt, speaking about him, and he actually spoke over my microphone saying his name. And that particular one, it sounds just exactly like his voicemail. Because when you called his number and it went straight to voicemail, he just said Wyatt. The way he said it, the way he clipped it, that's what this guy caught on the podcast. And he pulled that out for me. And then he also pulled out just his voice, just Wyatt. He pulled out me talking with Wyatt saying his name, and then just the small clip of him saying Wyatt. But to me, yes, that is Wyatt checking in. I don't think it's anything else that can be Wyatt. Am I 100% positive? No, I can't be, because I'm not looking at him talking to me. So I just have to go by what I feel and hear on that situation. And I think a lot of people should do that too.
See, I talk about it a lot on the show, about the whole, like, trusting your gut feeling. Like, there's things that can definitely manipulate you, don't get me wrong, but there's certain things that you can feel it, you know? Like, there's a prime example I always use is, you know, if somebody's grandma passes away and they feel like a hand on their shoulder, if you're misinterpreting that, you know, that might be something absolutely horrifying. But if you feel it and you know and you connect and you can feel it in your heart that it's your grandma that's touching you, then, you know, who is anybody to tell you any different? Because
exactly,
we don't know, like you mentioned, what happens on this other side, be it heaven, be it, you know, whatever else might possibly exist. But, you know, assumably, you know, if there is a heaven on the other side, if there is this other place on the other side, I feel like just to have a total block off from all the people that you cared about doesn't necessarily seem like that would be the thing that would happen. You know, like these people that pop in that obviously lived, you know, fruitful, happy lives, and it's not like they're stuck here, they're trapped here, they're just hanging around their family or anything like that. You know, I feel like there's these opportunities where, you know, you can go back and you can kind of just peek on your family from whatever's on the other side, because I feel like that, you know, whether it's this heaven concept, like pure heaven would be the fact of being able to check up on people. It wouldn't be completely blocked off after you pass away until you're able to see them again. You know, they may not be able to see you, but you can still see them. I mean, I'm sure that there's definitely some evil things that try to stick around here, but, you know, the little things like people's grandmas and stuff like that they feel sticking around. I've had my grandpa follow me around forever. You know, I don't think that they're trapped here all the time. It's just a matter of, you know, once in a while, you know, they'll hear like a wind of themselves and they can check up just to let everybody know that they're okay and that, you know, they don't have to worry about them on the other side.
I agree. And I hope that if anybody takes anything away from this today, that they'll let their friends and family talk about different things that they think has happened and not badger them into making them feel bad about thinking it.
Yeah, it's one of those things. When it comes to the paranormal, it seems like everybody has some type of a story of something that's unexplained. It's just a matter of getting it out of them, getting them comfortable in the situation. And I'm not saying to like just go out and throw your most crazy story and say like, oh, what's your paranormal experiences? But, you know, you just have to get people comfortable and make them feel like they're not in a place where they're going to be judged. I mean, you know, that's kind of half the battle with podcasts, is that you try to create this place where people have the open opportunity to come and talk about their bizarre experiences that everybody else would shun them for. I mean, half the battle is just letting them feel invited and know that you're not going to think that they're crazy. You just want to hear truly what they have to say. And if it's unexplained, then, you know, maybe I could help you explain it. But on the other side, if it is something unexplainable, then if there's two people that can't explain it, then maybe you have something. I mean, even throw that at people that, you know, if you had a weird experience that they can't quite explain, you know, maybe I can logically figure it out for you, because sometimes separate set of eyes helps lead to a different prize. But again, if both people end up coming to an end where they have no explanation for it, then, you know, you might have something, and then, you know, you can kind of solidify that person that they did have some type of bizarre paranormal experience.
Exactly. Just give the person benefit of the doubt. Let them talk.
I mean, even just for the sake of sometimes these experiences are extremely traumatic. Like you get into like the cryptid ones, or even some of these paranormal experiences. So regardless of, I guess, depending on the person asking if you believe them or not, you have to keep in mind that they experienced something that was traumatic to them, and they definitely need to be able to vent it out. And if you don't give them that opportunity, then it's just going to stay inside of them forever. And like I said, even at the simplest, if it was just something very simple, they get it out of them, and you might be able to explain it and make them feel better. But at the end, if you can't, then you might had something. So again, they don't feel like they're crazy anymore because they're not the only person that says they've had an experience like that.
Exactly right. And I couldn't tell you how many times I've gotten a message or a phone call or a text that says, "You're not going to believe what just happened to me."
That's always the best. Lay it on me.
Yeah. And I'm usually thinking, I probably will. Let's hear it.
Inquiries of Our Reality will be right back after this brief commercial break, so stay tuned. And now back to the show. And talking about some of these experiences, I'd definitely love to dive into some more of them. I know I kind of sidetracked you a little bit with the EVP stuff, but I'd love to, if you got some more that you want to talk about with that, or even some more of these other personal experiences, because I'm assuming that you've probably had at least one or two experiences where you may have seen something. So I would definitely love to dive into some of those too.
I haven't seen as many apparitions and, shadows or anything as much as I want. But sorry. I hope you didn't hear that. Did you hear that?
A little bit, very, very faintly.
Sorry about that. Thought I had it turned completely off. I had seen at the old hospital the little girl called Mary. And she was peeking around the door. I saw her like most people see out of the corner of your eye. And then as you turn, they go away. That's exactly what happened. I saw movement out of the corner of my eye, turned, and she just went back through the door. But it was a little girl. That was not too long after that. I was over at Pam's house, the one that was at the old cotton mill with me. And Chip had gone to work. She wanted to know if anything was bad at the house. And I was, no, there's nothing bad. There's nothing bad at your house. And she said, well, come over and see if you can figure out who or what it is. Well, I got to see who it was. We were sitting in her living room. She was telling me the things that had happened, different things, showing me the different parts of their house. And we sat down in the living room, and I was facing the flat screen TV that was off. And you know how shiny those are. So she was talking to me. I saw movement and looked at the flat screen, and the most beautiful redheaded woman was gliding behind me. I mean, dressed to the nines, like in a ball gown, and long red hair. I turned, and she wasn't there. Pam said, did you just see something? And I said, who's the redhead? And she said, oh, you just saw Chip's mother. I said, she's beautiful. She's showing herself around 20 or 30, though. And she said, that was definitely when she was younger. And I said, long red hair, beautiful. She's dressed up in an evening gown. And she said, oh my. And she says she's definitely showing out. And she said they had a lot of her furniture, and she was always worried about people taking care of her things. And I said, well, so she's just kind of staying around making sure that you are taking care of her things. I said, but she's a gorgeous lady. They had no more problems, none whatsoever. Now, the weirdest thing I've seen was not human. And it was here in town again at an old business that had been around since the 1800s. It had been built on too many times, and they had this haunting going on. They would hear footsteps. They would hear different things. It would set off the motion detector. Lots of it. Slap the counter, slam the door. You could hear the footsteps stomping. And so I went to see what it was, and it showed itself again in reflection. I was sitting at the desk where this woman got terrified and just minding my own business, couldn't get anything to happen, nothing. And then finally, when I was distracted, I looked back and saw some movement, looked down into the glass that was on top of the desk, and over me was floating this black cloudy mass with eyes. And of course, I looked up and there was nothing. It was gone. And I don't know, too, if when I do look, it's my brain that shuts off my sight where I can't see it because I'm not ready to see it full on yet. I don't know. I don't know what that is. But that makes me so mad, too, because I want to turn and see it, and then it's gone.
I've actually heard a few people mention stuff about this, saying that the receptors in the side of your eyes are a lot different than the ones in the front, so they pick up on different colors and different, like, frequencies and things. So I've had a few people that have claimed that, you can really only see these things out of the corner of your eye in, like, full detail, and it's extremely rare that you see it right in front of you. And I mean, even when you get into like these shadow people or like these dark cloud concepts, like I've often wondered if it's not necessarily that even if you're seeing them directly, that you're even really seeing them. It's just a matter of your brain knows that something's there, so it fills in the gap. Like that's why these things appear as all black, is because you can't make them out. It's just a matter of your brain just fills in what it, like just basically a black space in a spot that it knows something's there, but it can't quite make out what it is.
That's interesting. That could very well be.
Because it seems like with a lot of these like shadow people things too, like I've had a few cases where two people will see a shadow person and one person will see it as this dark cloud and the other one will see it more as like an apparition. So I'm kind of curious too if like, again, it's a matter of your brain perceiving it differently or even just people's eyes possibly perceiving it differently because, females have more cones in their eyes than males do. And it seems like females are a lot more prone to see full apparitions than males are a lot more of the time. I have a lot more experiences with that. It seems like with like females seeing full apparitions where guys see a lot more of the shadow people a lot of the time. So I've often been curious if it might even just have something to do with like the matter of our eyes and the light frequencies and the colors that we're able to take in.
Could very well be. I know talking about the receptors, somebody told me that your sight is best at the edge anyway. So I don't know if there are more cones and rods. I don't know. I don't know the makeup. But
I think it's supposed to be something that goes back to like the hunter-gatherer ages. Like from what I've kind of researched into it, it's a matter of spatial awareness in the aspect of you're focusing on one thing and then you see something move off in the distance. It's supposed to be like a survival instinct that you catch any movement in the corners of your eyes because that's not where your full focus is. So it'll catch your focus and you'll turn that direction. So that's, anytime you see anything on the corner, your first instinct is to turn. I think it goes back into that survival instinct.
Very cool. Yes, I'd never heard that part. That's good.
I said with a lot of this stuff, it seems like you kind of start diving back and you realize that there's like reasons why all these different traits and everything exist. So it's always fascinating. I always try to like look for explanations on why things might potentially work the way they are, because you kind of get laid out with this idea in front of you and you're like, how does this make sense? And then you start to kind of correlate how it might possibly make sense. But, like a lot of say, you got to fling stuff at the wall in order to figure out what's going to stick.
Right. But too, I love talking to different people like you, because you'll learn something new.
Oh, yeah.
It's just the more people you can talk to, the more you can add to your toolbox and make your investigations better. Whether or not you get to investigate with the person, you can still get ideas from them. So, I mean, the hunter-gatherer and the predator kind of thing, that makes sense to me.
Say that's honestly the best explanation I could possibly come up with that. But again, it seems like more often than not, like everybody kind of talks about these like wisps, which kind of have been put under like the shadow person motif. And I mean, a lot of the time it could just be simply a matter of if these things are around, they're peeking around a corner, you can kind of pick up on that. And then again, once you turn, they've already kind of done their little peek, so they're already out of here. They might have already taken off at that point, Or, yeah. I mean, simply maybe the observer effect, like I was kind of mentioning earlier, that, if these things are some type of like energetic being, if you put your full focus on them, they might just disappear elsewhere because they're aware of that fact that you're putting your full full focus on them.
Could very well be.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back after this brief commercial break. And now back to that deep conversation you crave. But I'd love to dive back into some of your experiences, of course, too. Because I'd love to, I'd like to break down that last one a little bit. You'd mentioned that you saw this dark cloud above you. Did you end up doing any type of like research or anything into possibly figuring out what it could possibly have been, or even some of the history in the building, if anybody else has had any experiences with anything like that there?
They had actually seen this thing on camera. It set off the motion detector, and they caught it crawling up into a desk chair, turning to look directly at the camera. And it was just this staticky, cloudy thing with eyes.
That's one of those things that you don't quite know where to place, because, I mean, you could go a million different directions with it. I mean, you could get into the idea about if something, possibly tries to stay here for so long, it eventually possibly starts to lose that humanoid shape because it hasn't had this physical vessel that's kind of holding it within that shape, and it turns more into this energetic being. Or even on the flip side, I know a lot of people like to throw out the idea of demons, and they talk about this whole thing about the 3 scratches and all of this type of stuff. But, if you kind of go back into the references of them being disembodied beings, assumably they aren't going to possibly have a physical shape. So, I feel like when people experience these dark cloud energetic type things, it's probably more along the lines of what's being actually described as a demon than what people typically have this motif of this little thing that's going to be running around with horns chasing you around, or a little girl with like turned back evil eyes. Like, I feel like these things are going to be not necessarily defined by a shape, especially if they talk about them being disembodied beings. And I mean, that motif seems to go across a lot of things. It isn't even something that's specifically just Christianity, talking about these disembodied beings, like, I can't think of any other good motif that you could possibly put behind these types of things, other than possibly, I've had somebody else that was talking about this idea about if you have these like dark spaces that, it might theoretically work almost like a magnet, where if you have all this like negativity and all of these evil things, it'll start kind of fixating and sucking into this point. So when you experience a cloud like that, it may not necessarily be like a conscious being like you're thinking of, but possibly like an embodiment of just negative energy all existing in one place. And you start getting into the whole idea of like the idea about everybody putting like thought or focus onto something. And if you start putting thought or focus into this thing, then it might actually start taking shape into this whatever it happens to be. And this kind of goes into the whole idea of like the I'm brain farting on the name right now, like the thought form idea. There's a specific name for it, but I'm just going to drive me crazy, and right after the show I'm going to remember what exactly the word was, but
Tulpa,
yeah, tulpa, that's it. Yep. So if you have this, for lack of a better term, almost like unshaped putty, and then people start kind of putting this idea on it, it might start to actually turn its shape into whatever people are thinking of. Like the whole thought form idea, I don't think there's 2 possibilities of how it could work. It could either work where everybody's energy and thoughts get put into it to create the thing, or there might already be some type of energy there that gets shaped into what people are thinking that it is.
Yes. And the more people that input, the stronger this thing is formed.
And that's when you start getting into, what's the name of those experiments? The experiments where they basically created this whole backstory to this paranormal entity that was going to exist. And then once it actually started forming, it actually started interacting with them and moving the table and doing all this other stuff. And again, does it go into a matter of that was something that they all put their thought into and created from their own minds? Or was it a matter of something already being there and then it took the shape of whatever they were projecting the thought of? Because it seems like with a lot of these things, when you talk about these entities, these different beings that have existed since the beginning of time, they all go by different names, and they go through multiple names throughout the period where you can kind of start to follow the lineage going through. Like these things, I think that there's something that exists beyond like names necessarily. It's a matter of the thought that you're putting into them. So you can call them whatever name you want as long as you're thinking about them when you're putting that name into it. It doesn't matter if you're calling them this, that, Bob, whatever. If you're thinking about that specific thing and calling it that name, it can go by whatever name it is. It's just the thought that you put into that specific thing.
Exactly. And 2, I think, especially around, all over this country. It's not just especially here, even though we're bombarded with it. We have Native American things all around us, mounds, just everything. So people are always finding arrowheads. People are always finding shards of pottery. There's just a lot. What if a medicine man had conjured something to go get something for him, like a fetch, like a witch's fetch, to go get something for her? After the medicine man dies, what happens to his helper?
Mm-hmm. It just sticks around and doesn't have anywhere else to go.
Yeah, because energy doesn't die. Once it's created, energy doesn't die. It just changes form. So could that black cloudy mass become the shadow, could become the mist, could become an apparition, and just changing forms the way it wants to be, depending on who it's in front of. How does he want to intimidate that person?
Mm-hmm. That's something I've often wondered. And even on the other side, talking about the Native American stuff with the specific lands too, they definitely knew the land. Like, as far as, like, there was a lot of different instances where they knew the exact footpaths to go through swamps and nobody else could possibly make it past it. Like, they knew the land. And there was a lot of these areas where they just said, there's evil there, we don't go there. There's bad stuff there, we don't go there. How many of these places that the natives would refer to like that have we just totally lost track of through the years, and we've built whole housing developments or built hospitals or built this in these specific areas where it was like, we do not even step foot in that area to hunt, let alone anything else. And we've just kind of completely forgotten the fact that the people that knew this land had specific areas they said we do not go in.
Exactly right. Or when we desecrated their land for something and built something like Hell's Bar Dam here, not very far from me, maybe an hour. It never held. It always leaked. It was built on native ground. It was taken over by a white man, of course. And later, when the dam was actually built, it never held. It was always something wrong with it. There was several deaths happened. Supposedly, Chief Dragon Canoe is still haunting the area, and you just never know. You kind of don't mess with native stuff. You shouldn't.
I mean, in all fairness, you shouldn't mess with graveyards or burial sites altogether to begin with. I mean, I know there's a place in Defiance, Ohio, where Walmart had bought this property not realizing that there was actually a Native American burial ground there. So their version of dealing with it was they started digging up to set up the parking lot, realized that there was this giant burial ground there. So they just paved over the entire thing. And ever since then, people have been talking about seeing like native spirits like lining up the back of this parking lot and just all over this parking lot. And again, it's like one of those things that once a body is put into a spot, it doesn't matter what culture you come from, whatever. Like, the moral thing to do is to completely leave that thing alone. That is the ground where that body is laid. You should infinitely leave it alone. So the same goes for, doesn't matter if it's Native American burial sites, doesn't matter if it's old colonial burial sites, even the whole idea of like moving a burial site somewhere else. Like, I don't think that any of that's right. And the land is already, for lack of a better term, already tainted at that point. Like, once something's a burial ground, just, that's it. That's never going to be used for anything else ever again. And that's just my opinion on it, because you never know what might come along with it.
I agree, but you know how people build. And engineers come in, they'll make a new dam, and that ends up flooding an area, sometimes several towns with cemeteries in it. And I understand now that they try to reach out to as many of the families as possible to get them to say, yes, this is our families. Okay, we're going to move it here. We're going to move it there. And the ones they could never get in touch with, they left. So to this day, around Guild, Tennessee, you can see some of the tombstones, just kind of the very tops of them out of the water where they were left. They didn't get moved.
I mean, that's a whole other level of terrifying. I mean, I'd never even want to swim in any of that water in that area at that point. I mean, obviously the ocean's completely full of bodies, like, let's be 100% honest, but when you got a river that you can already see the tombstones in, I mean, that's just asking for trouble.
I think so too. In Chattanooga here, this is back, I think at the turn of the 1900s, they were trying to clear an area, and they ran into a native burial ground. Instead of doing the right thing, they pushed all of these Native American bodies into the river. Just pushed them in. And they built this area. It's around Riverfront Park now, where the aquarium is. And they've been having trouble ever since back in the 1900s with that area. It's just, you don't mess with Native American. You don't mess with burial grounds, like you say. You don't mess with anybody's burial grounds. It has to be done a certain way. It's got to be done the right way.
I mean, it's one of those things that we, came from European culture, and not to mention the fact that European culture today still has these areas where they say, all right, that's where the Fae lives. So they will literally wrap a highway like miles out of the way to avoid this area.
Yeah.
Like, the same people are the ones that are destroying the Native American burial grounds and making a straight path through it. It's like, all right, you already had that idea. You already had that logic that there's these areas that you just don't mess with. So why do you think it's any different in this land that's significantly older and more horrifying than you ever could realize? Like, you start diving into the folklore creatures of like Europe versus the United States, and it's like, yeah, the stuff from Europe can be horrifying, but the stuff from the United States is a whole other level. And that might even be why, the Native Americans, a lot of them remained nomadic, was because they knew that this land was a lot different than other lands.
Yeah, could very well be.
Inquiries About Reality will return after this quick commercial break. And we are back, so let's hop right in. I guess kind of starting to wrap up a little bit towards the end, I always like to take an opportunity that if you have any local folklore from your area, since you kind of dive into this stuff, a lot of the local folklore tends to die off if you don't bring it into a new means, be it through books or even through, podcast media. So I'd love to dive into if you have a couple like local folk stories, and then I would also love to dive into where people can find your books at, of course, if they would like to investigate and check out your books even further.
Sure. Well, 5 miles from my house is where the Flintville Monster was originally seen in the 1970s. And this is an aggressive Bigfoot. Some people say it was white. Some people say no, it was dark. So they can't agree on the color of the Bigfoot, but they all say it was aggressive. When it was first seen in the 1970s, it was running across this ground to get to this little boy. And the mother actually looked out the window and saw the thing coming for her son and got to her son, got him inside and shut the door. But it has supposedly knocked dents into cars and trucks. And so it is just not, it's a grumpy Bigfoot. We have a grumpy Bigfoot around here. Maybe he's not had enough moonshine. I don't know.
A lot of people talk about this in the Sasquatch community, this like rogue Sasquatch concept, that it's almost like the younger male kind of gets kicked out and he goes crazy for a little bit. And I think that's what a lot of these sightings that people experience are, because it seems like the elders of these things, they tend to be smart. They're never really seen. It seems to be these younger ones that go on these rampages for a second and then they just disappear and nobody hears anything about them. I think that this case is one of the prime examples of a rogue, considering that it was more aggressive, because typically these things aren't aggressive unless they got something going on. Like I said, it's the rogue that got kicked out of the tribe, something like that. Like, and a lot of the time it might even be because they tend to be more aggressive.
So it's I asked one cryptid guy and said, gee, so if it was white, could it have been an old Bigfoot? But now you're saying it's probably a younger one, and I can see where he would have gotten kicked out. whippersnapper, we've got to get rid of that one. He's causing too much trouble. He's going to bring too many people out here. We're going to get seen. Get rid of that one. And yeah, and now he's pissed and has to go out on his own. And what's he going to do? Well, I'm going to take that kid over there and I'm going to beat up cars.
Mm-hmm. I mean, even when it comes to the light ones, I know there's a lot of people that theorize about the older ones being white, but it seems like with a lot of these cases, too, it could also be the possibility of what's in their hair at the time, because a lot of people will talk about, they'll see these things and they'll almost look scaly sometimes because they'll have dry caked mud in their hair. So depending on the weather that they saw this thing, you know, if they had dry mud on it, it could have looked like a lighter color, but if it was in the dark, it had like wet mud, its hair was wet, then it may have looked like a darker color. Because there's a whole thing with Scape Swamp, the whole lizard man encounter, that, you know, there was a handful of people that described this lizard-like being, but the majority of them described this Sasquatch-like being that had like cracks in its skin. So there's a lot of people that have actually theorized that the Scape Swamp monster may have actually been a Sasquatch, just had dried mud in its hair, and that's what kind of gave that impression. Because when you start diving into these older cases, like a lot of people didn't necessarily have a frame of reference. Like back in the 70s, you know, you had was it the Boggy Creek movie and stuff? Mm-hmm. Like you had like a handful of movies. It was in books, but most people didn't really have like this is a Sasquatch. So like a lot of these encounters that people were kind of describing, you know, they're using the best language that they've had at the time, but it wasn't until relatively recently that people started to kind of correlate this idea about Sasquatch having different things in their hair. So even the Scape Swamp, it wasn't really theorized that could have been a Sasquatch till later on, when people actually really started diving into these old cases and realizing that there was a handful of people that described this thing as having hair. So, you know, like I said, a white hair possibility is definitely possible. The albinoism possibility is definitely possible. Or like simply it was just a matter of people seeing this thing at different times when it was caked in different things.
I like that. I like that idea. I could see where, especially around here, you could get mud all over you and be seen at a certain time and be a different color. So that tracks. You know, my dad is from here. I swore when I left the county I'd never come back, and I'm living 15 minutes away from where I was born, in the old hospital. My dad always talked about the Flintville Light. I never heard him talk about the Flintville Monster, but that started like again in the 70s. The Flintville Light is one of those urban legends that you hear all over the country. Everybody's got one of these, like Crybaby Bridge. Everybody's got one. And this thing, the story goes, the guy got hit by a train, knocked his head off. Now he has to wander the tracks for eons with the lantern, walking, looking for his head. So there you go. That's in everywhere. Every state has one of those.
See, I think that's one of those phenomenons that everybody sees it. There's clearly something bizarre up to it. I know a lot of people like to throw ball lightning, all these like ridiculous things that are just as rare as actually seeing something that's of the bizarre, you know, if you're actually throwing those contexts of things. But there's clearly this whole idea of orbs that people have seen that are related to the supernatural, they're related to the paranormal, to cryptids, to UFOs, to all these different types of things. So there's an ongoing motif with these lights, but it's a matter of in specific counties, you know, going back into the explanations of things, you know, a lot of people don't have an explanation, so they create this giant folklore that ends up being wrapped around it. But it's like you have to almost read between the lines that there is this formation that people kind of created in order to somewhat explain it, but there is definitely an ongoing phenomenon. Like when you start getting into the Brown Mountain Lights, all these different things, it's not just like some folklore story that nobody experiences. Like a lot of the time people will go and they'll literally see these lights, but there's no scientific explanation to it. There's no real explanation to it. It's all just theory. So like, again, a correlating thing that you see everywhere, that it's like, what is the root of this? This is like one of the weird things with the community as a whole, that everybody's starting to realize that there's a lot more in common between everything than separate. And one of the main conjoining things that you see between, you know, all of the main communities is the fact that orbs seem to be related to almost everything.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, mostly we get people to send photographs and say, tell me what this is. Okay, well, they think it's an orb. and it's a camera flash, or it's a flare from the camera itself, or it's a dust particle or moisture or something, a bug. You can actually go to elkvalleyparanormal.com, look at the old hospital evidence, and there's a video on there. There's two videos. The night vision one is about the creeper, and I had to take a still of the creeper because he moves so fast. And to me, he looks like a cross between the Michelin Man and the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, but he's only like 3.5 feet tall. And he's moving really fast. He did not want to be seen, but luckily Billy, the videographer, caught him. And if you're just watching the video, you will miss him if you don't know what to look for. So I've got the still that you can see to look for in the video. But the other video is of this orb that came from a doorway and went right into the wall. It's a true orb. It has its own path. It has its own light. But the reason it's there is to get your attention away from what shoots across the floor. So to me, that was the most interesting part of that video. If you just watch the orb, you're going to miss what goes across the floor. If you watch what goes across the floor, you're going to miss the orb. So, it's there for a reason, and it was something paranormal. It had its own direction. It did not go with the breeze. It was not dust. It was not a bug. It was an orb.
See, I've often wondered if these orbs and the way that they can join with everything is that if these things are coming from somewhere else, be it another reality, another dimension, whatever you want to call it, they're probably not going to be able to travel in their not humanoid, but like physical form. So you'd have to condense in order to be able to pass through these things. So I often wonder if that might be the conjoining thing here. It's not necessarily that every single thing is related, but if they're coming from somewhere else, the means of being able to pass through to come into whatever this physical reality is that you have to condense to re-expand back into this reality. And these orbs that we're seeing might just be something else coming from somewhere else. And I've even thrown this other idea just to play devil's advocate, and I know a lot of people don't like hearing this, but the whole idea about the others, that all these phenomenons that we're dealing with might possibly all just be one thing. And if it's these orbs, it's a simple single thing, then it might be able to appear as whatever it wants to possibly appear as. So it's not a matter of it being connected to everything else. It's just one single thing that will show itself however it chooses to show itself.
Exactly. Well, you touched on something. I think all of this stuff is connected anyway. It's all energy. It's all vibration. Anything paranormal that we look at, it's all energy. But the cryptologist, they're looking at energy and vibrational forces. UFO, it's all energy, vibration. Is it connected? I think it could be.
Or just a matter of more understanding on how these dynamics work, because, we've always been kind of trapped in the idea of just a single physical reality. And it seems like, you've had this underlying tone of vibration and frequency that's kind of existed through like occult text since the beginning of time. But, with a matter of understanding, it may not be as complicated. But also on the other side, to bring up the whole idea of like observer effect again, if you constantly are always thinking that this is your physical form that you always exist in, then you're always going to exist in this physical form. But if you expand your mind past the idea of existing in a physical form, then who knows what you could potentially be capable of. And, some of these experiences where people have like astral projection, I've often wondered what they may look like from the outside. If, somebody astral projected and you did a conscious experiment to see what they looked like as they astral projected, is it possible that they might appear as an orb? And it's just a matter of nobody's taken that time to consciously try to see what somebody might look like as they're astral projecting?
I have a story about that. I was just about to tell you about this girl skipping dimensions, because, we talk about parallel universes and stuff, but she actually skipped dimensions on her near-death experience. and there was a collision that happened. She didn't die, but she can't find any information about the accident that happened. She can't find anything, but people talk about it. So it's kind of a weird thing. She also astral projects, and she was, during COVID, her father was very sick. He was in the hospital. His bed was close to the nurse's station, and you know how busy the nurse's station can be. It's just, there's a lot going on. He wasn't getting a lot of rest. And Nikki was actually astral projecting to him and just telling him that she loved him and just standing by. And when his wife came to visit him the next time, he said, "Tell Nikki thank you for coming, but tell her I have a job for her." And his wife said, "Nikki hasn't been here." And he said, "Just tell her what I said. Tell her I have something I want her to do. Tell her I'm not able to sleep good, and I really would like a nice night of rest." And his wife said, "Okay." And so she goes back and tells her daughter, and she said, "Are you doing that astral stuff again?" And she said, maybe I am. And she said, "Well, your daddy says he hasn't had a good night's sleep and he wants you to look into it." So she did. And she found that the nurses were keeping him awake. So she put into their mind somehow, gave them the suggestion to shut his door, because she kept saying, "He can't rest. You guys are being too loud. He can't rest." And eventually one of the nurses got up and went and shut his door. The next day, his wife came back and he said, "Tell Nikki thank you." And so he was seeing her and able to get messages through his wife to her, that Nicole was able to astral project and get things done for him as well.
See, that's one of those scenarios that it's like you hear it and it's like undeniable. Like, you know, people want to pretend like that kind of stuff doesn't exist, but I've always thrown this, like the government has spent how much research trying to figure out how to do this type of stuff. If there wasn't something to it, then the programs wouldn't be hidden. They would not have changed the names multiple times and invested as much money as they have into it, down to the fact that they still use astral projection in order to try to, you know, get into government secrets to see the inside of bases and everything. Like, there's clearly something to it. And I've always thrown this whole idea about the conspiracy of the paranormal, that I think there's a lot more of an understanding of this paranormal realm than what they're led off to. But they let people on a lot of like paranormal shows like make it look like it's this, "Oh no, I got scratched by a demon. Oh no, there's this. Oh no, there's this," because it pulls away from the validity of it, that the average person who sees the paranormal and they're like, "Oh, you know, it's just a bunch of like gags and just fun stuff to watch," you know, and they take away from the fact that there's a lot more to it. Like that's half of like the psyop with things, you know. You can't pretend like you push people into thinking that it's something totally different than what it actually is. Like I think that there's a lot more of an understanding of this stuff than what they lead off, and they just let all these shows basically just pretend like it's something other than it is.
I think you're right. And they let the shows be so, there's so many of them, it gets saturated.
Mm-hmm.
So we're bombarded, and they like it like that. It keeps everything confusing. Yep. Everything's confusing.
And then you have a bunch of people that are throwing out definite answers to everything. And I even wondered, I mean, expanding back into the whole conspiracy of it, is it possible that some of these things that people might be communicating with might just be people astral projecting that are intentionally throwing misleading information purposefully? Because as we talked about earlier in the show, you never know what you're communicating with on the other side. You never even know if it's something on the other side. It might be somebody astral projecting or somebody simply messing with you. Because I mean, I feel like there's a pretty good handful of people out there that would astral project just for the sake of pulling pranks on people.
You know, I know a few people that would do that too.
See? I mean, what not a better way to prank somebody if they can't see you, right?
Absolutely.
Hold on tight, guys. This is our last break, so stay tuned. And we are back to the show. So let's hop right in.
This has been a great conversation.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We'll definitely have to come back around for a second round at some point. But for the listeners, of course, before we get into where you can find your books, and I'll make sure that you give the listeners a full list of all your books so they can go and check out. But I always like to end with some words of wisdom before we get into that. So if there's any words of wisdom that you might want to bestow on the listeners today, what might it be?
If you're getting involved or wanting to get involved with the paranormal, go with a group. Don't go out by yourself. Make sure you're safe and make sure that you stay safe. So do what you do, depending on what you believe in, to make yourself safe. And that can be anything from saying a prayer to meditation to wearing crystals, carrying crystals, or throwing salt. Just do you. Be safe.
Oh, yeah. And even expanding it even into the more physical world, of course. If you have the opportunity to get permission to go into a place, always make sure you get permission first. Because there's a lot of people that go and paranormal investigate without permission. And, a lot of people don't want to do it. But if you just take the time, simply say you want to investigate a graveyard at night. If you go and you ask your local police station, hey, I'm a paranormal investigator. We would like to just check this place out at night. We're not going to cause any damage. We're not going to do anything. You'd be surprised on what kind of permissions you get. Do everything within legal means. But yeah, you have to throw that one out there with people, because I've been to a few places that I've talked about on the show that I know I wasn't supposed to be in, and a lot of people think that's, just free. Yeah, go into that place, go and check it out. But yeah, just to be safe, let people know where you're going first and foremost. And also, if you have the ability to, definitely make sure you have permission to be where you are for your own safety, because if you're on private property, that can end bad depending on what state you're in.
Ooh, yes, it could. That could be, you might find yourself at the end of a gun and the wrong end.
Exactly. And if anybody wanted to come and find all of your awesome books, where might people find them at? And also, what exactly would they find with each of your books?
Okay, so right now there's 6, soon to be 7. They're all on Amazon in paperback, Kindle, and Audible. That means you don't have to read if you don't want to. You can just listen to it as you're driving or whatever. But most of them are true ghost stories and eerie tales. There is one book of fiction that Mark and I did. Mark Elliott Foltz is the one that does my covers and illustrations, and we did a fictional book together. I also edit all of his, so if you pull up my name, Cyn Shrader Hill, then you'll also pull up Mark Elliott Foltz and see everything he's got. We publish under Foltz Hill Press. You can find me, Cyn Shrader Hill Author, on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all of the above, all that good stuff. If you got a story that you would like for me to consider putting into one of the books, you can reach me at cynshraiderhillauthor@gmail.com.
Well, I appreciate you making the time to come on today. And of course, I will add all of those links down in the show description so everybody can find them quick and easy. And I'm really looking forward to next time. And again, thank you for making the time to come on the show today.
Thank you so much.
If anyone would like to get in touch with me for any reason whatsoever, you guys can do so through email, which is inquiriesofourrealitypodcast@outlook.com, or through social media. Instagram and Facebook are the two that I'm the most active on. Or you guys can also get a hold of me through the submission form, which is available up at the top of the link tree. And the last way you guys can get a hold of me is through the hotline. You guys can call or text it 24/7, and that number is 313-364-1551. And just as a little bit of a reminder, we are trying to put together a Halloween special that includes your guys' call-in experiences of the paranormal, or even of cryptid encounters or alien experiences. So if you guys don't mind calling in, if I can at least get about 10 of you guys, then we can put that episode together. So again, just a reminder if you guys don't mind doing it. And every single thing that I mentioned is all available down in the show description. Same with that phone number if you guys happen to miss it. And with that, hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. Hope today's show has connected some dots in your own reality. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. Have a good night, everybody.
Reality isn't what it seems. Abductees taking aboard a craft with a tractor beam. Is life a simulation or an astral dream? Aliens travel through black holes in different galaxies. Life is a bizarre odyssey, with the mic talking about philosophy. Well, Bigfoot is stalking campers as a Wendigo walks through the woods of sharpened antlers, using a Ouija board to talk to the dead like a necromancer.